We are live now. Soti Bante, Soti everyone. We will now begin our session of the study group. Before we get into our reading, we will begin by taking the 5 precepts together. Is there anyone that's willing to lead with the precepts today? If not, I can do it. Ahang Bante, Ti Saranena Saha Pancha Silaniya Chami Dutiyam Piyahang Bante, Ti Saranena Saha Pancha Silaniya Chami Tatiyam Piyahang Bante, Ti Saranena Saha Pancha Silaniya Chami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisaranagamanaṃ nititaṃ.
Ama Bante.
Pāṇātipātā vēramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Pāṇātipāta veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Adinādāna vēramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Kāmesu micchācārā vēramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Kāmesu micchācāra veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Musāvādā vēramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Musāvāda veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Surameraya majjapamādāṭṭhānā vēramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi.
Sura Merya Maja Pamadatana Vedamani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imāni panca sikkhapadāni Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibuting yanti, tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Welcome everyone. We will now get into our reading. This is a text that we are starting for the first time today. The Dhamma Cakkappavattana Sutta.
We have to share it with the group, please.
So we're going to read in alphabetical order with who's in our Discord.
You have to share it with the group. In Discord, you're not sharing it.
Sorry, Bante. Give me a moment to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
In the Discord?
Both.
So we're going to be taking turns reading in alphabetical order in the Discord community in our study group channel right now. Edit, may you start us off today, please? We're going to take turns reading 2 paragraphs each. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Samyutta Nikāya, the connected discourses on the truths. Setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus of the group of the 5 thus.
Okay, let's
Bhikkhus.
stop there. Stop for a second. So, welcome everyone to the online Dhamma study group. We have the new format. We're on YouTube now. So this is a way of combining together 2 things that we've been doing quite regularly, and that is having a Q&A session and having a study group, a textual study group. So we're combining them together. The first hour will be us studying this text, or a text, starting with this one. And the second hour will be general Q&A. So if you have general questions, you can post them in the chat, but we're going to ignore them for the first hour. And maybe someone will collect them and can ask them for you later. The Dhamma group is in 2 parts. So there's the Discord group, And then there's, of course, the broader YouTube community. The Discord group is much smaller, and to get in the Discord group, you have to have done at least an at-home course in our tradition, and you have to be willing to read aloud as part of the group. So if you fit those two criteria, you're welcome to join the group. If you don't, well, you have to sign up for the at-home course or come and do a course at our center or something like that. And you need a microphone to be able to participate. But there's no requirement to join. The broader YouTube community doesn't have voice, but they have a voice in terms of typing, and they can express themselves and ask questions and so on. And we'll try and connect with the YouTube community as well. So we're starting, the first hour is textual study, and because this is a first meeting in this format, new format, we thought it would be symbolic to start with the very first discourse of the Buddha, which is what this is, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. Originally, we thought to study the Mahasi Sayadaw's commentary on this sutta. That was our decision, and that's where we were headed. But then it seemed right, if we were going to do that, to start by studying the actual sutta, the actual discourse that Mahasi Sayadaw was going to talk about. So there's a book by the Mahasi Sayadaw, who's a very famous teacher, monastic teacher in Burma, who was many years ago, and the teacher of my teacher, as well as many other practitioners around the world. So he wrote a book on this sutta, explaining it, and not just explaining the sutta, but using the sutta as a sort of starting point to talk about a lot of things, a lot of aspects of the Buddhist teaching. So it's a really good introduction to Buddhism, and the sutta itself is a good introduction to some of the basic concepts of Buddhism. Now, the sutta is not a beginner material necessarily. So just because it's the first thing the Buddha taught doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's for beginners. So one thing about this sutta study group in general that you have to understand is as a newcomer, you might not understand everything that is being said or talked about or read, and that's okay. We stress that it's not necessary to understand everything to be a scholar and to understand the deep nuances of the theoretical teachings. It's actually okay if you don't understand anything. If you just listen and practice mindfulness and take part in the community and maybe post questions or comments or even just express your approval, that's a really great thing. And it doesn't make you a lesser Buddhist at all. There's no shame or stigma against being a non-intellectual. If you're not keen on the deep intellectual questions that might come up, or topics, or the Pali discussion of Pali grammar or Pali terms or this or that, that's fine. We hope you're comfortable here, and I hope you find it valuable, and glad to have everyone as part of the community. But what I mean by saying this isn't beginner material is Mahasi Sayadaw is going to go into all the details. I'm going to try to not put too much commentary on the sutta, because we've got a whole book that's going to go into it much better than I ever could. But just one thing I will say about this idea of it not being beginner material is that this was given to 5 ascetics who had been practicing intense ascetic religious practice, had renounced sensuality, had renounced the world, and had dedicated themselves to torturing themselves. So not only is it not beginner material, it's also partially, at least the first part, directed towards the specific issue that these 5 ascetics had, which was they were torturing themselves, and they thought that was the way to become enlightened. So keep that in mind as we go. And the bulk of this, it's not long, and the bulk of it is the very core topics in the teaching of the Buddha. So this if you don't understand what's going on, if you're not clear who these people are or what these teachings are, it will all become clear in future sessions. This is just the first thing that the Buddha taught after he became enlightened, the first official discourse that he gave, and he gave it to these 5 ascetics who had followed him and then abandoned him, and then who he came back to. But Mahasi Sayadaw will tell that story in the weeks to come.
Sadhu, thank you so much for that introduction, Bhante. So with that, we will start our reading now. Edit, you may begin.
So I will start over completely, right?
Yes.
No,
please.
keep going, that's fine.
Keep going. Okay. So, bhikkhus, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What to? The pursuit of sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana.
So this is a really famous quote, not quote, I guess people don't quote this so much, as this is this concept of the middle way, right? It's iconic as a part of the Buddhist teaching. It's one of the first things people learn about Buddhism. It's not actually all that core to the in the sense of it being middle to the Buddha's teaching. It's certainly a part of the Buddha's teaching, but it's not what the Buddha taught most often, because it wasn't that common. This is why I said it's in some ways specific to these 5 monks, is it's not that common for people to torture themselves. We all sometimes do things to hurt ourselves, and there's some level of self-torture, but not as a religious practice, not thinking this will lead to enlightenment. And that's what he was really getting at here, that yes, these monks had abandoned sensuality, and that's great, but they had made a mistake of going to the other extreme, thinking if A is not the answer, then the opposite of A must be the answer. But the Buddha said that opposite is also not the answer. Pleasure is not the answer, but pain is also not the answer. In fact, neither pleasure nor pain is necessary or essential in the practice of the Buddha's teaching. And it's in fact what he called the middle way. But it's not the middleness of it that's important, because both pleasure and pain can be part of the path if they're approached properly. If you apply the path to pleasure, pleasure can be a perfectly valid object of meditation for the practice, for the attainment of enlightenment. And pain as well. Pain is not something to be avoided, and it's not a problem. Pain is not a hindrance if you apply mindfulness in the same way as you would with pleasure. So it's the way that one directs one's attention. So if one inclines oneself towards the pursuit of sensuality, saying, this is going to lead me to happiness, well, that's wrong. But also, likewise, if one says, I'm going to discard all pleasure, discard all pleasant feelings, and torture myself and experience only unpleasant feelings, and that's going to lead me to enlightenment, then that's also wrong. But the important aspect of the path is not the middleness of it so much as it is the objectivity, the mindfulness of it, the purity of it. The Buddha talks about the path as being a path of purification, and we just finished studying part of the Visuddhimagga, which got into that. But this paragraph particularly, I think, has to be acknowledged, was directed specifically to the five monks. It's useful. I mean, we use this. I use this from time to time. If a meditator is pushing themselves too hard, I say, well, that's an extreme. The Buddha taught against extremes, so it is useful. It's just not something you see the Buddha talking about time and time again. He doesn't emphasize this middleness as avoiding the two extremes. It's something somewhat unique to this sutta. Still a valuable teaching for sure. Someone had a question about the sutta. Why does it start with "Thus have I heard"?
Yeah.
So many suttas start with "Thus have I heard." There are suttas that don't. There's a set of suttas that starts with "Iti Vuttaka." It's called the Iti Vuttaka, but it starts with, because it wasn't recited by Ananda. I don't remember the particulars of it, but it's I think it's Udayi or something like. Actually, I'm not sure. Some other monk, I think. There's a story behind that. But "Thus have I heard" is the orthodox answer is that it's Ananda saying this. That when Ananda recited these, he started each one by saying "Ewang me sutang," thus have I heard. "Ewang me sutang," thus has been heard by me. Sutta. It's not where the word sutta comes from. We call these things suttas. I don't think it has any connection. Sutta is heard, but sutta is a thread or a discourse. It literally means thread. Another thing to note is that I think ideally we'll be going through these texts slowly, which means don't be afraid to ask questions. That applies to everyone in the Discord group and everyone on YouTube. Don't be afraid to veer off into other topics of Dhamma. As long as it's related to the Dhamma, I think it's perfectly valid for us to go off track. It's perfectly valid for us to take pauses, and everyone take a pause every so often and bring yourself back to mindfulness. Bring yourself back to the present moment.
Yes, so
I
after
wanted
each
to ask a
paragraph.
question, Bante.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you have the Pali text in front of you.
Yeah, another thing about this sutta is this is one that we recite quite commonly in Thailand, at least. I haven't recited it here, actually, though I'm sure some people do. But I have it not memorized, but yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue, so I could follow along if other people were reciting it. So yeah, the Pali is not. I know most of the Pali for this one.
Uh, can you see or tell me the word for ignoble?
Anaryo, not noble.
Uh-huh.
Dukkho anaryo
It's
anatta
Arya.
sanghito.
Uh-huh. It's Arya, and the negation is Anario.
Yeah, in English, ignoble is the opposite of noble, so it's pretty literal.
Very interesting. Thank you.
And what, bhikkhus, is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which leads to Nibbana? It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This, because, is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana.
Okay, so this is obviously one of the most important teachings of the Buddha, the most core teachings of the Buddha. Here we have it, the Eightfold Noble Path. After he taught the middle way, the avoiding of extremes was the first thing the Buddha ever taught. The next thing he taught right away was the Eightfold Noble Path. So what he's doing here is he's said there's a third way. This way, no, this extreme, no, this extreme, no. There's a third way. We'll call this the middle way. What is that middle way? This is the Eightfold Noble Path. But then once he's mentioned the Eightfold Noble Path, I mean, this is a great way of teaching. He's mentioned it, and then he takes a step back. Then we'll get this. We haven't, in the next paragraph, he's going to take a step back, and he's going to say, what is the context of the Eightfold Noble Path? It's in the context of the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are what make up the core of this sutta. This is really a sutta about the Four Noble Truths. And it's the Four Noble Truths that constitute the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. They are considered not exactly the spokes, but there's 12 spokes. But the 12 spokes are the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the wheel. The wheel of Dhamma is the Four Noble Truths. This is the Dhamma of the Buddha. This is it. This is the core, the essence. And that's what this sutta is really presenting. Its core is the Four Noble Truths, which, again, it's not about the middle way. People ask, what is the first discourse about? The middle way? Not so much. Kind of, but the middleness is not the emphasis. The emphasis is the Four Noble Truths, suffering, and the dealing, how we deal with, how we overcome, how we free ourselves from suffering, how we create suffering and how we free ourselves from suffering, the mechanics of how samsara works. That's what the sutta is about.
Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the five aggregates subject to clinging are suffering.
Mahasi Sayadaw will go into all of this in great deal, so I'm gonna refrain from commenting on the teachings here, because this is for us to absorb and not necessarily understand, especially if you're a newcomer to Buddhism. It's fine. Just absorb and have heard this. So you can say, Ewa me sutang, thus have I heard. Because after the sutta, we're going to go over all of this again in much detail. And it's going to be, I think, a great experience, especially if you're a newcomer. You'll learn a lot. I think we'll all learn much from it, reading it. But the sutta itself, if you're knowledgeable about Buddhism, it's fine. I mean, it's fairly simple, and it's about the turning of the wheel, the teaching of something that had never been heard before. So all of these things, for those of us who are knowledgeable about Buddhism, we've heard these things before. There's nothing new here for us. But consider, this is new. This is it. This is the moment. I mean, it's really a special sutta. It's why it's so commonly recited in Thailand. It's considered very powerful to recite this. On my teacher's birthday, one time, I think his 80th birthday, and maybe after, actually every birthday, I think he did it, but he would have them recite this. This was the sutta that he had. He invited like 108 monks to come in one room and recite this sutta. This was a thing that he did on his birthday. It's really powerful. I mean, this is a moment in our history, the history of the world, that has no equal, no parallel. There's nothing like it. This was the moment. Like you can say, like when I was young, we said, "Where were you when Princess Diana died?" I remember where I was when Princess Diana died. It was just such an important moment for as a kid. That moment when there was the car crash and so on. This is this. I mean, this is no comparison, but this is a moment where this is a one-time event that has no equal. Of course, we don't remember it. It's not in our lifetimes, but as Buddhists, something that is very powerful, very moving for us to consider, that this was the moment when the world first heard of the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths.
Now this, because is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust. Seeking delight here and there, that is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. Now
Yeah,
this because
existence and extermination are one way of translating these. We usually say becoming and non-becoming. I think why I say that is because craving for, well, it's fine, but existence, it's in the sense of becoming more. Bhavatanha is craving for, I know why he wants to avoid the word becoming, because bhava doesn't really mean becoming, but it kind of does. And that's the whole point. It's further existence is the point. Craving for further existence doesn't hit it. Becoming can be any kind of becoming. You want to become famous, you want to become a rock star, you want to become a politician, you want to become a god, a deva, a human, an animal, you want to become something. Or it can be wanting to have something come into being, like I want a good job, or I want a big house, or I want a new car, or I want a spouse, or I want children. This is all bhavatanha. Vibhavatanha is the opposite. I want this not to be. Something that is, I want it gone. Something that I am, I want to not be that. That's vibhavatanha. But Mahasi will again go into all of this, so it's fine.
Now this because is the noble truth of cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it.
Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right concentration. So all eight. This is the noble truth of suffering. Because in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, truth, and light.
This noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. Thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. This noble truth of suffering has been fully understood. Thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
Okay, so this is where we first begin to see the spokes of the wheel. And if you're not paying close attention, you might not catch it. It's easy to miss it and to be a little bit confused later on. Each of the Four Noble Truths can be separated into three parts. There's the truth itself, that it is the truth, and realization of that is a part of the wisdom, part of the knowledge, part of the understanding that the Buddha gained. Then there is the realization of what you have to do in regards to the truth, what has to be done. So a Buddha comes into realization of what needs to be done as a part of his introspection, as part of his observation. He sees the issue and the task. It's called kicca. So the first one is satcha, that's the truth. The second is kicca, that which needs to be done. And the third one is katta, the realization that it has been done. And the point is that only once you've actually done what needs to be done can you say that you have understood or truly done what needs to be done in regards to in regards to that truth. So for each of the four, there's going to be three parts. One, what is the truth of it? Two, what needs to be done about it? And three, what has been done about it. And until you can say that you understand the truth, understand what needs to be done, and know for yourself that you've actually done what needs to be done, only then can you say you are accomplished, let's say, in regards to the Four Noble Truths. You're enlightened. I mean, that's the point. Enlightenment is based on these 12 spokes of the wheel, and he's going to mention that after he lists them here. But briefly, the four tasks for the First Noble Truth: to fully understand, right? What is he? Fully understand. The second one is to be abandoned. The third to be realized for oneself, and the fourth to be developed. And we'll see that. You'll see how that works. So this first one, the first noble truth, this is a question I've often asked people and caught people on. Because if you ask people, what did the Buddha tell us to do in regards to suffering? And the answer is almost always free ourselves from suffering. The Buddha taught us to free ourselves from suffering. It's not wrong, but it's not the best answer. The best answer is here. The best answer is this one. What did the Buddha tell us to do about suffering? To fully understand suffering. And that's important because the practice of mindfulness is often very uncomfortable, is often about confronting suffering, confronting and facing, observing, paying attention, rather than running away from it. So being free from suffering, people often think of it as running away from suffering, but being free from suffering actually means understanding it, fully understanding it, so that it no longer causes you suffering. And that's a big difference. It's a categorical difference of understanding. So this first knowledge is very important in that sense of not just being a truth, but in terms of understanding properly what is to be done, not run away from it, fully understand it, which often means facing it and being very, very patient and objective in regards to it.
Edit, please continue for us.
Okay. This is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Thus, because in regards to the things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. This noble truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. Thus, because in regards to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
This noble truth of the origin of suffering has been abandoned. Thus, because in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. Thus, because in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
This noble truth of cessation of suffering is to be realized. Thus, because in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
So the translation realized is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But just to point out that the word is satchikattaba, which has a little more emphasis than realized. It means realized for oneself. So the emphasis is that you're not being told about it, you're not thinking about it intellectually. Satchi, I think, comes from sa'aki, which means with one's own eyes. So like when you see something for yourself rather than believing someone else. Just to put it out there, that what he's saying is this is to be attained for oneself, to be contacted with, not just to be thought about or intellectualized or believed in.
Bante, there was a question in the chat.
Hmm.
The question is, what is the difference between knowledge and true knowledge?
Yeah, I would say true knowledge is not a good translation there. It's too much. Like, this is rhetoric. These words are mostly rhetoric. This is a quality of the Buddha's teaching to impress upon his audience. He would repeat himself using different words, which would often give another facet to the same idea. So he's just talking about, there arose in me wisdom. I mean, he could have just said that, right? But he's giving different facets and approaching it from different sides, and it's a rhetorical tool. It's a way of teaching in terms of speech. I do it as well. You see, I will say something and then I'll say it in a slightly different way to drive the point home or to help sort of massage it in your minds. It's like massaging your brain. You know, I can't just poke it in there. You have to kind of work it in from side to side. So that's really all he's doing there. But the words are chakku. There arose in me the eye. And this is often something that people point out, that this is one of the Buddha's eyes. Was enlightenment is a chakku. It's an eye. Knowledge is a very simple word, jnanang udapadi. There arose in me jnana, which literally means knowledge. That one's easy. The third is panya, wisdom. So actually panya is interesting because jnana and panya are the same word. The root is jna. Jnana just means knowledge, but panya, you add pa at the beginning and it means something a little more significant. So not just jnana, but pa jnana, basically. Pa meaning strong or it's a strengthening, so it gives it more importance or more weight. So panya is more than just jnana, but it isn't always. Sometimes the Buddha used the word jnana just to mean panya, because it's the same thing. When he says jnana, sometimes he means panya. He just doesn't include the pa. He just says jnana because it's a pa jnana. It's an important knowledge or a deep, meaningful knowledge. That's wisdom. The next one is vijja. And vijja is interesting. Wait, vijja. Yeah, for some reason it's not coming. I'm pretty sure Vidya. No, it's not. I was going to say it's the same root, but it's not. Yeah, the thing about vidya is interesting because it also means knowledge, pretty literally, but it comes from a different root, which is, I guess, fairly common in Pali and Sanskrit. There are different roots that mean the same thing. It's just how language kind of diverges and then comes back together. So it comes from the root vid meaning in regards to knowing, but it's kind of a little bit more experiential sometimes, but really not always. In practical usage, vidya generally just means the same as jnana. Vidya is often used for practical knowledge, and I guess that makes sense because vid is where the word vedana comes from, which is a whole other tangent. The word vedana, which we know to mean feeling, but vedana really means something more closer to experience. You experience, they talk about vedana as being the taste of the object. How does it taste? Vedana, of course, is pain or pleasure or calm. It's how you really viscerally experience the object. That's vedana. It comes from the root vid as well. So vid in regards to knowing or knowing, really. It's pretty simple. But yeah, just a different root. So when they translate it here, they don't just want to say knowledge again, because that's kind of all it is. Vidya and jnana, they have different connotations. It's probably better to say something like practical knowledge or experience. No, experience, I don't know, experiential knowledge. But vidya doesn't always have that deep connotation either. It often just means knowledge. So yeah, nothing deep there. But I think true, there's no sense that I can think of where vidya means true knowledge. Maybe the commentary says something like that, I don't know, but vidya really does just mean knowledge again. You can't translate it like that.
Bhante, can we take vidya as the opposite of avidya, means opposite of ignorance, so basically Four Noble Truths?
Well, it'd be better to say avidya is the opposite. Avidya is just vidya with an a at the beginning.
Yeah.
So it means lack of knowledge.
And when the sutta says panya udapadi, could we also take the progression up to the Buddhahood, like he attained Chatupapada Jnana, Pubbenivasanussati Jnana, same point of enlightenment?
I don't see that personally, because he's just talking about when you realize this truth. Each truth was panya. In regards to this truth, panya udapadi. It sounds like you're trying to read more into it than is actually probably there.
Yeah, could be. I'm not sure about that.
I mean, it's interesting what you say, and we could certainly overanalyze. I think it would be overanalyzing, but it's nothing really wrong with that. Like the commentary does that sometimes. You think maybe they're overanalyzing, but it's not really bad. I mean, certainly what you just said is valuable, and we can talk about that. Yeah, the Buddha did have many stages or stages of progression, but panya doesn't really imply that explicitly. Could it be why he said it? I don't think so, but I guess it could be, sure. Maybe there's something somewhere where someone analyzes it deeply in that sense, but I don't see it. Like, why would you do that when you're giving a talk, you know? I guess we could say these guys were just so far beyond anything we could comprehend that they just understood it in a way that we never could, but probably more likely that it was just a rhetorical tool, as I said, and he's just massaging their brains with different words. I mean, it's a very common thing to do, and remember, this isn't something that was written down. He didn't write this as a letter, so he had to make sure he had to include each of the terms. No, it's something he's speaking to them. And when you're speaking, you're not. When the Buddha spoke, he didn't explicitly or primarily try to impart knowledge. It was about bringing the person to enlightenment through speech. And that's where these kind of tools become very valuable, where you say cakkung udapadi, jnanang udapadi, panya udapadi, vidya udapadi, aloka udapadi. aloka is just light, but it means basically the same thing. It's like when you have darkness, you can't see anything. That's what ignorance is. Ignorance is like darkness. So something like light arose. It was as though someone had flipped a switch and he saw all the stuff that was right there in front of him that he just didn't see, completely didn't see before. That's like someone turned on the light.
Sanka, please finish for us.
Yeah, sorry, I got disconnected. Uh, this noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been realized. Thus, because in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
This is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be developed. Thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light.
This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering has been developed. Thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. So long, bhikkhus, as my knowledge and vision of these four noble truths, as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, was not thoroughly purified in this way, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its Devas, Mara, and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its Devas and humans. But when my knowledge and vision of these 4 noble truths, as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its Devas, Mara, and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its Devas and humans. The knowledge and vision arose in me. Unshakable is the liberation of my mind. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence.
This is what the Blessed One said. Elated, the bhikkhus of the group of 5 delighted in the Blessed One's statement. And while this discourse was being spoken, there arose in the Venerable Kunyanda the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation.
So that was it. Actually, that's the end of the sutta. You can say it's not very, as I said, very long, and it's basically the end is just making the point that this is what it means to be enlightened. As I said, the Four Noble Truths, the 12 aspects, 4 times 3, right? 12. It's pretty simple. The rest of this is going to be the result, what happens as a result of the teaching, which is pretty impressive. Kondanya. Kondanya was one of the 5 ascetics. Kondanya was the only one of the 5 to prophesize that the Bodhisattva was definitely going to become a Buddha, like as the story goes. Many other Brahmins came and prophesied that he might become a Buddha if he left home, but he might also become a emperor of the world if he stayed as a prince and became king. But Kondanya looked at him and said, looked at the baby, Siddhartha, and said, no question, he's going to become a Buddha. There's only one way for him. So he was a little bit more in tune with the Buddha, as we can see from that. And so as a result, he was the first one to appreciate and fully understand the teaching of the Buddha when it was taught. And this is the Dhamma eye, not vision. I mean, vision's okay, but it literally means eye. Dhamma cakkung udapadi yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha dhammanti. A very important phrase, and I guess Mahasi Sayadaw is most likely going to go into some detail about that as well. But this is worth remembering. This is what it means to see the Dhamma. So if you want to understand the very essence of how it feels or how it goes to experience the Dhamma, how it is to experience the truth, this is how it is, to see that whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation, which means that nothing is permanent, nothing is satisfying, nothing is controllable, nothing is worth clinging to. Just see everything arises and ceases, that there is no me, no mine, no self, no control, none of that. There is only experiences arising and ceasing. Once you really see that, then you experience cessation, nibbana, and the first time you become what is called a sotapanna, someone who has seen the truth and has entered the stream to become fully enlightened, or to become an arahant.
Thank you, Bhante. Since we're about to reach the hour and you said that's the end of the sutta, we will stop our reading there.
Yeah, there's not much left. How many more paragraphs are there? We could just finish it.
Finish it? Okay, Bhante.
Yeah, let's just finish it.
Okay. And when the wheel of the Dhamma had been set in motion by the Blessed One, the earth-dwelling Devas raised a cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin, or Deva, or Mara, or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. Having heard the cry of the earth-dwelling Devas, the Devas of the realm of the four great kings raised the cry. At Varanasi, etc., this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by anyone in the world. Having heard the cry of the Devas of the realm of the four great kings, the Tavatimsa Devas, the Yama Devas, the Tusita Devas, the Nimarati Devas, the Paranimitta Vasavati Devas, the Devas of Brahma's company raised a cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world.
Varanasi is Varanasi. I think in modern times they call it Varanasi. If you're wondering why that is, it's Va and Ba are very close in sound actually. Ba, Va, they're both made by the lips. And so it is a common switch there. But if you're wondering where this is, it's Varanasi. It's a city in India. In modern times it's called Varanasi, and Isipatana is nearby, and you can actually go and see the deer park there today.
Thus, at that moment, at that instant, at that second, the cry spread as far as the Brahma world, and this 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked, and trembled, and an immeasurable glorious radiance appeared in the world, surpassing the divine majesty of the Devas. Then the Blessed One uttered this inspired utterance. Kondanya has indeed understood. Kondanya has indeed understood. In this way, the Venerable Kondanya acquired the name Anya Kondanya, Kondanya who has understood.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.
We have 2 questions in the chat.
Someone going to ask them?
Okay,
Yes.
I'll ask the first.
Go ahead, edit, please. Thank you.
Does knowledge a means to attain wisdom, Bhante?
No, knowledge and wisdom are one and the same. I mean, I suppose it depends what you mean by knowledge. But regardless of what you mean, the answer is still going to be no, because if you mean knowledge that is not wisdom, well, that's not the means to attain wisdom. It's not knowledge that leads to wisdom. But if you mean when the Buddha says knowledge here, he's actually just talking about wisdom. As I said, they're just synonyms, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, not pretty much. They are synonyms. It's complicated because there's different levels of what you could call wisdom or knowledge, but the words themselves are interchangeable. But then there is knowledge that is not wisdom, as in intellectual knowledge, which isn't, well, which can also be called wisdom, but it's not really, really deep wisdom, or not the important kind of wisdom. And that knowledge is helpful in leading to wisdom. Obviously, you need knowledge of how to teaching, and if you were going to properly put the teachings into practice, of course. But that knowledge isn't what leads to wisdom, not directly. It's the practice, it's the observation, it's mindfulness. Mindfulness is what leads to wisdom in the simplest sense.
Yeah, it is said that there are 3 levels of panya. One is sutame panya, knowledge gained by listening or hearing, reading, and chintame panya, knowledge by intellectual thinking, then bhavaname panya, knowledge by direct experience or meditative knowledge.
Okay, so the next question is, when the Buddha says, in regard to things unheard before, I imagine he doesn't mean he never heard about these things in any of his past lives, that he never heard a Buddha give a Dhamma talk.
It's an interesting question. I mean, it is an interesting question in general about what did the Bodhisattva learn from other Buddhas. It's pretty clear that he avoided any deep practice of the teachings. But I mean, even still, it wasn't so much that he didn't learn anything from other Buddhas necessarily, as that he had made a vow to become a Buddha. And someone who has made a vow to become a Buddha can't become an arahant, can't become enlightened until they're able to do it by themselves. And so there's two things he might be saying here, and I'm not immediately sure which one it is. Maybe it's both. Probably it's actually both. Is that it's in reference to that this, well, whereas he may have or may not have heard these things from others before, it wasn't that hearing. That hearing was irrelevant. That this knowledge came without getting any kind of hint from anyone. So he wouldn't have. It's, putting aside any idea that he had some connection with knowledge from past lives, that's not where this came from. This came from his own observation, his own introspection, his own practice. So he hadn't heard it before, or it's not so much that he hadn't heard it before, it's that that's the hearing. This didn't come from hearing, basically. Ananusutesu dhammesu. But ananusutesu dhammesu kind of implies the second a little more, and the second is unheard by anyone else, meaning this is something that no one has heard of. This is not in the world. And why that's more likely a little bit is because, remember, this is the setting in motion, the wheel of Dhamma. So the Buddha had already known these things for 2 months, right? Before this sutta. He had become enlightened 2 months previous, 2 months prior. 2 months prior. And so he had heard of it. It was in the world, but nobody else had heard of it. And that's the point. This is the moment when these things became heard of. These Dhammas had never been heard of before. Now they are being told. So when the Buddha learned about them, there was nobody. And there was nobody who knew them, is I think the idea.
Also, we can't really say that the Buddha heard it, because to hear it, somebody else has to say it, right? But the understanding it is different from hearing it from somebody else.
No, but the Buddha did meet with, the Bodhisattva did meet other Buddhas, right?
Yeah, but that is a different world system, I believe, right? So he's referring to this world.
I see.
And Dhamma had long disappeared from the world. This is for the first time it is being uttered. That is why it is setting forth the motion of the
I mean, I think it's simple. It's a little bit simpler than that. It's just there's nobody alive today, at that day, that had heard of the teachings. Meaning, ananusutesu dhamesu, these are unheard of in the world. I mean, I guess that's kind of what you're saying as well. But just simply put, nobody's heard of them. These are dhammas that nobody's heard of. I mean, I don't think we have to beat it to death or again deeply overanalyze it. Just unheard of. I think that's more likely. I mean, there also is the fact that, and I think it's part of it as well, is that he didn't gain these from anywhere. These are not dhammas that he learned from anyone because he had teachers. And as opposed to the teachings that they taught him, these were untaught. Anusutta means, it's a word that's often used relating to learned from someone. These are unlearned. In fact, it might be better to say unlearned, anusutta, as opposed to just sutta. Sutta means heard, but anusutta kind of means more like learnt. These are unlearnt dhammas. Maybe.
I kind of have a question, I guess, starting from this last question. In regards to, do you know how differently other Buddhas thought? For example, Dipankara, who actually predicted that he is going to become a Buddha, or Kassapa Buddha. So, was there a difference?
There were differences, for sure, but not in the, of course, not in the fundamentals. And there's one difference that we do know about for sure is differences in the Patimokkha. Some Buddhas didn't teach the Patimokkha. I mean, they didn't lay down a set of rules for the monks. And they didn't do it because their sasana was smaller and remote, and the monks the followers just lived in the forest and passed away without really spreading the teaching far and wide. That's happened. We also see we have to appreciate that there might be, this is going to probably be heretical and possibly even wrong, there's a little bit of gray area between Buddhas and Pacceka Buddhas. That's a heretical, fairly radical statement in some ways. I'm not trying to claim that that there's any kind of overlap, but it gets a little bit gray in the sense, not gray is, I guess, pushing it too far, but gray in the sense it's hard to tell the difference in some ways, because there were groups of Pacceka Buddhas, and there were even groups of Pacceka Buddhas who taught other people who became Pacceka Buddhas. Figure that out. I know this, well, I mean, this is in the text. There is a example that it's the next Dhammapada verse of a Brahmin student who couldn't figure out the end of his teacher's teaching. And so he went to, I don't remember where he went. Anyway, he traveled away from Takasila. This is ancient past, before the Buddha. He's telling a story of the past. This Brahmin student went forth to find the end of the teaching. And he found these Pacceka Buddhas, and he asked them, I mean, he went here and there and eventually found these Pacceka Buddhas, private Buddhas, and asked them. And they said, oh, we know it, but we won't teach people who don't become ascetics, who don't shave their head and put on robes and join us. And so he joined them. He shaved his hair and put on a robe and became a bhikkhu. And they taught him their teaching. Doesn't say what they taught him, but he became a Pacceka Buddha as well, and he passed away as a Pacceka Buddha. So how does that work? These are not truly Pacceka. They're not truly private because they taught him something. I mean, the answer most likely is that they didn't teach him to become a Pacceka Buddha. They taught him something less that was helpful for him to figure it out on his own because he had the perfections necessary to become a Pacceka Buddha himself. There's nothing really that controversial when you put it like that, and that's most likely the way it is. There's no real controversy here. It's just kind of quirky, that sometimes we get a little bit too set in our fixed in our ideas, pigeonholing things. There's the Buddha, there's Pacceka Buddhas, and so on. It's not that cut and dried. I mean, Buddhas are a bit different in some ways. In the fundamentals, they're the same, and in many ways, they're almost identical. But then Pacceka Buddhas also. It's not completely solitary. I mean, the category means they can't explain the Four Noble Truths, for example. Maybe basically that. But they can teach lots of good things. There are many cases of Pacceka Buddhas teaching things. They're not mute. They do speak, and they speak good, valuable lessons. So yeah,
but
complicated.
It is said that the Pacceka Buddhas can teach the path to heaven, but not to Nibbana. So they could teach about
Well, I mean, it's
doing
not
good
quite
deeds.
it's not quite as cut and dried as, I mean, sure, I mean, I know that, and that's what we're taught, but not directly. But they taught this guy something that triggered something that allowed him to become a Pacceka Buddha.
And they may even teach the jhanas. So from that moment, like for example, for ascetic Siddhartha, he learned the jhanas from Udakaramaputra and Alarakalam. But from that point onwards, it was up to him to go to the next level. So probably a similar thing happened with the Pacceka Buddhas. And also, as regards to the difference between Pacceka Buddha and Sambuddha is Pacceka Buddhas are not omniscient and they don't have those 6 knowledges only Sambuddha possesses. They are called the Saya Asadharana Jnana.
Yeah, I know all that. I'm trying to call into doubt a little bit of the certainty that you have about all these things. Because I know that, and for the most part, I think it's probably all correct, but I think it might only be for the most part. I just wanted to say that sometimes we get a little bit too sure, because do you know any of that? Do you know any of that for yourself? Probably not.
No,
Just
reading
reciting
from the
things
books.
from books.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit careful and appreciate that there is a little bit of leeway, probably not a lot, but just probably. I mean, I don't know. Could be a lot, but probably not. And the texts are pretty specific about there not being a lot of leeway. So we just say, I mean, we have confidence in the text, so they're probably right, but we don't know it, and it's can be a little bit weird sometimes. Like maybe it's not as cut and dried all the time as we think. That's all I was trying to say. I mean, I know all of that. There's a lot of categories. I mean, in general, you have to be careful, and maybe not in this case, but sometimes you have to be careful. Like this spills into this whole huge debate that people have over jhanas and how they get into this very fixed idea of what jhana is, and it ends up being at odds with what other people say jhana is. And that's an example of where categorization and being sure of yourself about what something is, kind of it can be dangerous, because even if it's true, it can still be dangerous because it's a view, right? You fix on that and you say, this is true, nothing else is true, right? It's not even that it's wrong. It can be right, but your attitude, that attitude of being fixed and sure about it when you're not actually, when you don't know it yourself, can be problematic.
Sure. And as regards to as some Buddhas not giving the Vinaya, it is because it is said that it is because the lifespans are so long during those times, and all, even the human realm is close to heaven in terms of people's virtues. So people rarely break the Vinaya. So there's no, because even when
Well,
the
the
Buddha,
sutta says it's because they lived in the forest, isn't it? They lived deep in the forest or something. I mean, the Vinaya,
yeah,
this is in the Vinaya Pitaka. Because they lived so deeply in the forest, they weren't in contact with people or something like that.
even so, Bhante, when the Buddha introduced the Vinaya rule, it's mostly when somebody did something wrong. So as I have heard, during these Buddha's times, people are so virtuous that they are not. There's no need to introduce Vinaya rules. Even during our Buddha's time, it took some time for Buddha to introduce Vinaya rules. I mean, he didn't introduce Vinaya rules initially when there were only arhats.
Hmm.
And it is said that if the lifespan is short, only then the Buddha's the Vinaya Pitaka is there. Because after the Buddha dies, need some guidelines on how to continue it. But if the lifespan is very long, the Buddha is still there for a long time. So there's less need for guidance system without the Buddha.
Bhante, we do have another question in the chat.
Go ahead.
How can one use martial arts like Muay Thai to become a better Buddhist?
Is Muay Thai martial art? The problem with Muay Thai is it's fighting, and I know there's a lot of protest about that. One thing I did hear about Muay Thai when I was living in Los Angeles, it was really useful and helpful for kids, kids who were street kids and kids that might get into gangs otherwise, a lot of kids that had trouble, and it was a great way for them to learn discipline and so on. So there's that. So I think there's valuable qualities to that kind of thing, but I don't think it escapes, even no matter how much you philosophize it or theorize it away, it's still fighting. All martial arts is fighting. Martial, right? The art of war. Martial is relating to war. No, that's what the word martial means. I don't think it is. Okay, I mean, it's something like Tai Chi, maybe, or really any of the less. Well, a lot of them are. See, martial means relating to fighting, so it's not really. I don't think you escape that, as long as you call it a martial art. Dancing, if we were to say dancing, could dancing? I mean, the problem with dancing is it's very sensual, right? But could there be a sort of dance? Well, we do a kind of thing that you would never call it a dance, but it's similar in idea to a kata or a form in karate or something, and that's the mindful prostration, right? Same idea. There's and even walking meditation is very formal, very rigid in its structure, could be like a karate, a martial arts form. But Muay Thai, I think you're straying far away there. But any kind of physical exercise can be an object of mindfulness. You can apply mindfulness in any physical activity you do, including Muay Thai, of course. The problem I have is that it's martial in nature. I think that's what the word martial means. I mean, it definitely relates something to do with conflict and fighting, which is not really the right mindset, you know. But the stuff that you do alone, like Tai Chi forms, karate forms, I used to do a lot of karate when I was a teenager, can be very meditative. So you could apply mindfulness. But the question is, why not just do mindfulness? Why not just do walking meditation? So to be a little closer to your actual question, to be a better Buddhist, I would be careful about that because, again, it's something that on the surface, and that's always going to be in your mind, that it's a contact thing. It's about fighting against someone else. I mean, Muay Thai is very ceremonial and so on, but it's still fighting. And you're never going to escape that, I don't think, unless you just Muay Thai yourself, If you just kick and punch with never a thought about punching someone or something, just doing it as an exercise or something, that's a little bit less. But when it comes to the idea that I'm going to use this against other beings, so this is talking superficially, not talking about actual experientially. But to be a better Buddhist, it's probably not the best way in my mind. I mean, I think the confusion comes because Muay Thai is Thai, right? But Thailand is not all about Buddhism, and Thai Buddhism, what people think of as Thai Buddhism, is not all the Buddhist teaching. Now, the Buddhism part mostly is, but the culture. Again, I think Muay Thai can be good and has valuable qualities for curbing young people's aggression, and channeling it in a way that is less harmful. So there's that. I mean, practically speaking, it's probably quite valuable. But for someone asking this question that you're asking, how do I use it to make me a better Buddhist? I would find other ways personally. I don't think it's the best way. I don't think it's something to be proud of. I don't think it's I think it's the great jewel that we might think, the jewel of Thai culture that we might think it is. Honestly, I'm not that knowledgeable about it. I've seen kids doing Muay Thai in a ring in a village. That's my only direct experience. I was there at ringside before I was a monk. This was a long time ago. My first trip to Thailand, I saw these two 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds doing Muay Thai together. It was very ceremonial and there wasn't a lot of violence involved, but they were still hitting each other. It was still a boxing match, basically. I don't know if I'm still live. I'm getting some worrying
Yes, Bante.
signals. Okay.
I think that's all the questions that we have for now. Thank you for answering all those.
So again, if people have questions, we've scheduled a whole hour. We've got another half an hour if anyone has questions. If not, we can end early, obviously. But this is our first session. This is it. This is inaugural. We have turned the wheel of Dhamma study. I don't know if that's allowed to make a sort of a pun on the Buddha's turning of the wheel of Dhamma, but no, it's Dhamma, right? So we can appropriate the term. We've set in motion not something as profound as the Dhamma, but we've set in motion something. We've set something in motion, and I think that's valid to say. We're not mocking the Buddhas. We're not trivializing this incredible, unequaled moment in history, but This is a moment in history. It's not nearly as profound, but it's meaningful for all of us, right? We have started our Dhamma study group. This is inaugural. And it's understandable that we're not going to have huge participation, but, hey, I'm happy with, it's great to see so many people come out. We have 43 people on YouTube right now. We have people here in the Dhamma study on YouTube, on Discord. Not everyone here has done the courses in our tradition, though. And not everyone here is everyone speaking? Is everyone in the group? You have to be willing to take part. Oh, well, I guess it's fine. Just be a little bit flexible.
Bhante, we have another question. The question
Go
is,
ahead.
Bhante, what did the Buddha do for the 2 months prior to giving the sutta?
He walked. He walked from, well, that's not true. He spent 49 days. Mahasi Sayadaw is going to go over all this, I think, but he spent 49 days after his enlightenment in and around the area of the Bodhi tree. 7 weeks, 7 different places. Patamang bodhi palangkang dutiyancha animisang tatiyanchang kamanang setang chatutang ratanagarang panchamang ajapalancha muchalindena chattamang sattamang rajayatanang vandetang bodhipatabang vandetang muni sevitang. The 7 Jaitya, I think, no. Yeah, I think they're called Jaityas. The 7 monuments. So after the Buddha became enlightened, he spent a week at 7 different places. This is where we get that image of the naga over the Buddha's head. That was 1 week. He spent 1 week contemplating the Abhidhamma. He spent 1 week in walking meditation, apparently. Just walking back and forth for a full week. Non-stop for 7 days, apparently. And he spent 7 days standing looking at the Bodhi tree, apparently. This is what the texts say. Bodhi Palangkang. I guess he spent the first week just sitting under the Bodhi tree. Bodhi Palangkang, sitting cross-legged under the Bodhi tree. Second, Second, he stood up and he looked at the Bodhi tree for 7 days. The third week, he walked back and forth for a week, and you can still see there's the Jankamana, the place where the Buddha walked. It's got stone flowers that have, a lot of them broken up, but you can still see the remnants of the stone flowers that are placed to mark the steps where the Buddha walked back and forth from where he stood, looking at the Buddha, at the Bodhi tree, to the Bodhi tree, back and forth. Fourth week, he spent contemplating the Abhidhamma. Fifth was at the Ajapala tree. Ajapala, is that a tree? Sixth, he spent. It rained and Muchalin, and he entered into Nirodha, I think, and Muchalinda, this Naga, came and put its head over him as an umbrella for 7 days, so he didn't get rained on. And the 7th week, the Rajayatana, which is another tree. And there's stories about each of the 7 weeks. So 49 days, so you subtract that from approximately 60. It's actually not that many days. Am I wrong here? Am I getting this wrong? 2 months, right? 2 months between Visakha and Asalaha. So 49 days. That left him only 11 days, which means he walked. Does that mean he walked from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi in 11 days? Let's see what Mahasi Sayadaw has to say about it. Probably I'm missing something, or he talks a little bit about how far it was to walk. The Buddha also met. See, the thing is, this isn't actually his first teaching, strictly speaking. He didn't teach these things before that, but he did teach someone something. He did talk to someone. There was this Brahmin, I think, or ascetic, who asked the Buddha, "Are you a god?" And the Buddha said, I'm a Buddha." He was quite impressed, I think, by the Buddha's deportment, and his radiance and so on. So he said, "What are you? Are you a god, a Deva, a Brahma?" He said, "I'm a Buddha. I'm awake." More questions, no?
Yes, Bhante. Next question is, why do you think the Angulimala Sutta is important? I remember you mentioning a movie relating to him.
It's not that important, to be honest. It's an important part of Buddhist culture and Buddhist history. It's important as a example. It's very important as an example of what's possible. That even killing people doesn't prevent you from potentially realizing the truth. Most of the time it does. For most people, killing someone would be a complete showstopper. It wouldn't be possible to get past that. But why it's valuable in that sense is because a lot of people feel dejected and low self-confidence, thinking that they'll never be able to realize the Buddhist teaching. You can say, well, Angulimala did, so if he can do it, after all those terrible things, most likely you haven't done all those terrible things. It's certainly possible. I mean, most likely people who have done terrible things are not going to become enlightened in this life. But certainly some people do turn their lives around and do make progress in the Buddhist teaching. Maybe not as far as Angulimala did. It was a fairly extreme case, but certainly have the potential and plant the seed so that in this life, if they don't become enlightened, in future they can become enlightened. I mean, it's just a good example to remind people that even someone like Angulimala can. You can. You have what it takes. Maybe not in this life, but maybe. And it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you start and you do something and you work towards it at your own pace, at some pace. It's also important because it answers the question. I guess it's kind of the same thing, but the specific question that we have from the Dhammapada of why was Angulimala able to become an arahant when he'd done all those terrible things? And the Buddha compared the two. He said, becoming an arahant is just a much more significant thing, that it's actually trivial to kill hundreds of people. Why is it trivial? Because in the rounds of samsara, it's kind of meaningless. It's just more muck in the dirt, muck in the swamp. The swamp's already full of mud. You just add more mud, you're not really dirtying up the swamp. It's full of mud already. So killing hundreds of people is not really that significant. In comparison, it is incredible. I mean, it is very significant, and it's obviously don't do that, right? But in comparison to becoming an arahant, which is meaningful in the rounds of in the on the level of samsara. So in terms of the infinite cycles of birth, old age, sickness, and death, becoming an arahant is meaningful because it's the end. It's a true end to the cycle of suffering. So is it significant? I mean, yeah, it's significant for those reasons. It's just not terribly core. And, there's not a lot of teachings in there that are very core that you can say, this is the core teaching of the Buddha.
Yeah, Angulimala was known as the brightest student under his teacher. So he was like an exceptional case. Like his perfections were almost complete. He was just misguided or misdirected. I would imagine a regular person killing wouldn't be able to achieve what he achieved.
Bhante, the next question is it possible to develop erroneous views from concentrating too much when practicing vipassana?
Wow, you've put a lot in that. There's a lot to unpack there, is what they would say about this question. Okay, well, practicing vipassana. Let's start there. You don't practice vipassana, and nitpicking here, but so I'm not actually trying to correct you, because I'm not saying, hey, don't say that because you're wrong. I'm saying, let's be clear. You don't practice vipassana, you practice satipatthana. Vipassana is basically saying wisdom. When you say vipassana, you're saying wisdom. It's another word for wisdom. It's just another one of these words the Buddha used to refer to the attainment of wisdom, which you don't ever practice. You never practice wisdom. You cannot practice wisdom. Wisdom comes from the cultivation of concentration, samadhi. If it's proper, if it's samma samadhi, if it's samadhi, honestly, if it's samadhi based on ordinary experience, because it has to be related to things that are impermanent and suffer. It has to be related to seeing the three characteristics. It has to allow for seeing the three characteristics. It can't be samadhi based on a concept or based on something else. So we call meditation vipassana if that concentration is focused on reality, focused on ordinary experience that is impermanent, that is unsatisfying, that is uncontrollable, that is not fixed, stable, satisfying, controllable, right? So that's what we call it. We say it's vipassana, but what we're talking about is practicing sati. So why that's important is because then you say concentrating too much. Well, if you're concentrating at all, you're not really practicing, you're probably not practicing vipassana in that moment. Why? Because practicing vipassana is actually practicing satipatthana, and practicing satipatthana is not about concentrating per se. Okay, I'm a little bit complicated, but when you say concentrating too much, what I mean to say is that it just tells me that you're not actually applying the practice correctly, right? Mindfulness shouldn't be possible to concentrate too much, because it's a moment of perceiving something as it is, right? It's why we use this word. Now, it is certainly possible, practically speaking, for someone to concentrate too much. But my point being, you're not practicing satipatthana in that moment. When you practice satipatthana, it's a moment of concentration where you experience something or see something as it is. Right? So when you feel pain and you say pain, it's certainly possible to push really hard and really emphasize the word or something, or try and force your mind to stay with the pain or something like that. When you say pain, to really, really get a headache, honestly, from it. It's common for people to get headaches when they do that. That's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is the experiencing the object, grasping the object just as it is. And that's why it allows for wisdom, because when you see it for what it is, that seeing is vipassana. And that seeing comes about by grasping it correctly. Like when you grasp a knife by the handle, don't grab it by the blade. Like what that means is when you experience pain, don't see it as me, as mine, as bad, as a problem, as something to be fixed. No, pain is just pain. And when you grasp it correctly like that, that's how wisdom arises. Very simple. So it's not that someone practicing, quote unquote, practicing vipassana can't concentrate too hard. It's that it's not really practicing vipassana. And okay, I'm kind of nitpicking there because what you're saying is that practically speaking, so yes, this is certainly possible. Someone can concentrate too hard, but all I mean to say is that they're practicing wrong. They're not practicing satipatthana. Now, so yeah, I just want to, I guess all I just want to say there is that it wouldn't be right practice. So it can't come about by practicing. All I meant to say is it sounds like you might be saying someone practices and whoops, they concentrate too hard. It's not a whoops. It means they're not practicing correctly. They have to adjust their practice if that happens. That's all. So still, yes, absolutely can happen. Now, do wrong views arise based on that? That's the weird part of this question because I don't quite see how wrong views. It's usually the opposite. And honestly, I think that's usually the problem. That's why someone might concentrate too much, is because they have wrong views. Wrong views are really the beginning. Right view is also the beginning. Right view is what leads to right practice. And so in many ways, the practice is about seeing how your wrong views are leading to wrong practice and correcting as a result of seeing that, as a result of the suffering that comes from it. So a lot of our practice is just trial and error and making mistakes and adjusting and fixing the practice naturally because you're paying attention, because you're cultivating right practice, because you're being fed right view by your teacher and by the texts, by the Buddha, by an external source. And because you're experiencing it as you're applying the practice correctly, you see what you're doing wrong again and again. So I'd say the answer is no, generally speaking. Generally speaking, it's the other way around. Practicing incorrectly comes from wrong view because you believe self-control. Why you would try to control, why you would concentrate too much is because of wrong view. Whether it's possible the other way, I mean, I think it can feed your wrong view. It certainly. I mean, where can wrong view come from? Wrong view can come from many places, I suppose. I think mostly the biggest problem that would come from focusing too much. It can lead to craziness, like probably much more about lack of emotional control, because you force and you force and you force, and that habit makes it impossible to stay objective anymore. They become very subjective. I've seen meditators, monks, who push themselves so hard that they just kind of go a little bit crazy. So I don't think it leads necessarily to wrong view so much.
There's a popular term in Buddhism called Yoniso Manasikara, which means paying wise attention to the world. So if what you mean by practice is paying wise attention to the world, then it cannot lead to wrong views. It's the opposite. The ayoniso manasikara is what is going to lead to wrong views.
Bhante, the next question. How can we reconcile problematic passages in the Buddhist text, for example, where women are portrayed as inferior to men, especially if these statements are attributed directly to the Buddha?
Well, some would argue that the Buddha didn't portray women as inferior to men. He explicitly stated that some women are better than some men, and of course the opposite, some men are better than some women. But culturally, I mean, a lot of it seeps into the texts. And I think certainly the Buddha, I mean, it seems like a charitable interpretation of the tone of the texts is that at the time women were in some ways inferior because of the way culture had kind of conditioned them. In some ways, obviously, there were many enlightened bhikkhunis who were wise and fully developed, but women were treated very poorly. They were treated like possessions. They weren't given education. They weren't given power. They weren't given authority. They weren't given agency. And we see the remnants of that in many societies today, where as a result, women are conditioned to have low sense of self-worth, low sense of agency, to have their worth be dependent on others and dependent on external things like Bhattacharya and Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami is a really good example of that. Her son was everything because that's all people valued her for. Her family valued her only for her son, and then when her son died, she just felt like she was worthless. I think it kind of implies that. It doesn't explicitly say that. So there's that kind of thing where the cultural state of women was not so good. So the Buddha says one thing, that women are just not capable of keeping the sasana going, which sounds really awful. You know, it sounds like women are just terrible and so on. But charitable interpretation would be to appreciate the times when women were perhaps not prepared to run the Buddhist community because of how they had been treated by men. You know? So practically speaking, it could be said that there was some lack of capacity. That's all the Buddha is saying. I mean, women and men is not a real thing, right? It's just a categorization. It's another one of these things where we say this is a man and this is a woman. And we reify so much about what that means and what does it even mean? Yeah, you can look at the chemistry and you can look at hormones and you can look at genes and so on, but none of that's terribly meaningful. It has implications, but those implications are not that meaningful. And so whenever we talk about women and men, it's only important that we are accurate. It's not necessarily important that we're fair. And why I say, sorry, that sounds awful, but what I mean to say is when we assess something, like a man or a woman could be completely incapable of becoming a monk. And we don't have to be fair to that person. We can say, look, you're just not cut out to be a monk, right? You're just not going to cut it. You're not ready. You're not capable. And we say, well, that's not fair. And you can say, well, yeah, it's not fair, but I don't have to be fair. We have to be accurate. And so you could argue, and I don't know whether it was true, but it seems like there are hints that maybe that's what was going on, that in general, a community of women at that time in India would have been weak. A group of women as monastics. But they kind of showed that it wasn't so much the case. I don't know. I mean, It's all history, but they did what they could, and women did ordain, and those who were capable went through hell to ordain and prove themselves and show that they were able to. But the fact that they had to, it wasn't just on the women, it was on society, and mostly on the men for being so misogynistic and create these structures in society where women were treated like possessions and given no agency and so on. Treated like slaves and in servants in their own homes often. Not often, mostly. What was the question? Did that answer it? How can we reconcile? So I don't know. The most of the problematic passages are in the Vinaya, and that's because that being the case, it's not really about Buddhism as it is about practicalities of monasticism, which may not be fair, but could have been solutions to existent problems that worked well enough. Because for the most part, the Buddha's teaching is not discriminating against men or women in any way. And there's very little of us that is man or woman, much less than we would think. Not much less than we're conditioned to believe. I mean, so much the core of the Buddhist teaching. I mean, if you look at this sutta that we read, and I'm just cherry picking now, but it's an example. I mean, most of the teachings are like this. It's nothing about man or woman, and in fact, it's instructive for us to let go of I am a man, I am a woman, and to let go of the idea of things being fair. Life is not fair. Groups of people are treated poorly by other groups of people. Individuals are treated poorly by other individuals and groups as well. It's just the way of things. Sometimes it's not even other people, it's just circumstance, where groups of people or individuals are disadvantaged, yeah, by, well, we'd say often by karma. Because the other thing is, take a woman or a minority who's treated very, very poorly, often horrifically, often in a way that no human being should ever be treated by others. But the cycle of karma is that the person doing the oppressing is going to be the oppressed. It's a cycle. And the person being oppressed most likely will be the oppressor in the next life. So there's a lot less innocence and a lot there's guilt on, well, yeah. I mean, the best way to say it probably is we don't have to feel like there's great injustice, because at the very least, the person being oppressed is likely in less danger than the person doing the oppressing. So what that means is, in some ways, we should feel more sorry, kind of perverse, but let's unpack it. We should feel more sorry for the oppressor. Because the person being oppressed can be a noble individual. And that's what's important, not whether they're happy or whether they're getting their way or so on. But, you see how many people suffer under oppression and suffer nobly, as opposed to the person who is wicked and cruel and mean, arrogant, self-righteous, whatever, doing the oppressing. You got to feel sorry for that person. There's no good future for them. Even if you don't believe in rebirth, even if you're not Buddhist, it's just, who would you feel more sorry for? The person who lives a noble life under oppression, or the person who is just wretched, evil, gross, of no esteem or interest? No one of any value would ever want to associate. Anyway, I'm not really answering your question, am I? I wouldn't worry about. I guess I just wouldn't worry about passages that you find problematic. I'm sorry that they're there, and I'm sorry that I wish there weren't there. But often they're a product of reality. They can also be a product of interpretation. There is the potential for additions and embellishments, to some extent. I guess the best thing I would say is don't put too much. Yeah, so what I was trying to say, don't put too much weight on them, because it's not that important. Being a man, being a woman, being black or white or brown or whatever, these are all just the vicissitudes of samsara. We go back and forth. And sorry that the text has passages that make people think they're biased, because if they are, that's not good. But I think if you learn the core teachings of the Buddha, you can appreciate that that's not Buddhism. Just maybe details that got embellished, or details that got misinterpreted or something like that. Or, in certain cases with like the Vinaya, it can just be, just sometimes you have to do things that way practically, because maybe women weren't able to, the Buddha could see that women just weren't in a position to be able to do that. They weren't ready for it. And so the Buddha had to be very careful about allowing women to ordain for some reason or other, for some real reason that was unfair, but perhaps a product of their cultural brainwashing as women, or their the lack of any kind of preparation for being so free, so free from the shackles of society. I don't know. I'm just kind of reaching, but it's not the core of the Buddha's teaching, so we can kind of just not worry too much about it, I hope.
And the other thing is, it's not just women. People with certain disabilities, certain sicknesses are also not allowed by certain Vinaya rules. So the problem is that people are not always aware of the context of the introduction of the Vinaya rule. They don't read the backstory, why it was introduced.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're comparing women to disabilities, being a woman to having a disability.
Even in cases of people thinking that women are discriminated, they just read the passage without investigating, is there a backstory to this? Why was this introduced? Is there more information in the commentaries? So that is one of the big reasons why people misunderstand things and make more of things than they should be.
Well, yes, it's true that without knowing which passage you're talking about, we can't be sure that whether it's truly problematic or just a misunderstanding.
And even people with different, certain kind of sexual genders are also, one could say, discriminated, but there's a reason why such rules exist.
All right, can we quickly go through some other important questions? I know we're over time, but if anyone's willing to stick around, we can go through some of them.
Yeah, Bante, I was just about to ask, we've reached the second hour. Just out of respect for your time, did you still want us to continue? Okay. So the next question is, Can the mind break through concepts and switch to seeing ultimate reality by using only the basic instructions and practicing for only 2 hours per day?
Trying to find it. Oh, here, I got it. Okay. 2 hours a day is a lot, to be honest, I think. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If you're able to keep up 2 hours of meditation per day, absolutely, you can. I mean, you kind of maybe don't want to be so dramatic about it. I mean, it sounds like it might be, I'm just guessing, it's a little bit, don't make it such a big deal about breaking through concepts and switching to seeing ultimate reality. Don't make it such a big boogeyman, like this huge undertaking. You kind of do it every moment that you practice. It's not at all about 2 hours or every day or so on. It's about moments. Any moment that you experience, you pay attention, and any moment that you note is a brief glimpse into that. It's just a drop in the bucket. And so with enough of those drops, not hours per se, but with enough of those drops, you really do start to change the way you look at things. I mean, it kind of happens without your awareness of it. The shift occurs kind of unconsciously, and it can catch you off guard, where you've shifted and you start looking at the world differently, and you realize, hey, I'm looking at the world quite differently. And you don't know when that happened, but it happened gradually because those moments, drops in the bucket, they're not hours. It's not hours. Hours are actually meaningless. You can walk for 2 hours, sit for 2 hours, and get nothing out of it. You can walk for many more hours and sit for many more hours and get nothing out of it. And you can take 3 steps and become an arahant. It's all about the moments. So yeah, absolutely. So I guess the best answer to your question more briefly is it depends on the person. So is that enough? Depends on the individual. Which means 2 things. It depends on their past, and it depends on how they apply themselves in those 2 hours and out of those 2 hours. So yeah, you say, I think you mentioned that. Using only, yeah, well, so you're not quite saying it, but I assume you're referring also to being mindful outside of practice, because that's going to play a part as well.
I mean, how would they know if they are practicing correctly?
Well, it's pretty simple, I think. I think that question is something that meditators often ask that's a bit misguided when the meditators ask it, because they're doing it and then they're wondering, how do I know if I'm doing it correctly? Thinking that there's something more to it. But to be honest, you really just do say the word in your mind. There's not much more to it than that. The point is that the problem is we put so much more into it. And you'll start to realize that you putting more into it is the real problem. When you can just name something for what it is, you're in a state where you're just seeing it for what it is, right? That's where we want to get to. So if you follow the instruction, you'll get there eventually. Depends on you whether you're able to go quickly or slowly. But you put that into practice, you'll get there eventually. The problem that happens, people stop practicing, they start practicing like a different way. Like I've had students who say, I just don't, I think it's better not, I had a student recently, I think it's better not to note. Okay, I mean, just stop practicing, right? Is that what you're saying? And that's wrong. That if you want to say, how do you know you're practicing? You stop noting. Yeah, that's wrong.
Or
So when you do
another
that happens.
Or another problem, Bhante, is when they are focusing on the word. Like you said, you just said say the word, but then they are focusing too much on the word.
I think that works itself out in most cases. I mean, it's important as a teacher to catch them. Like sometimes they'll see the word. Well, you just say seeing. You don't say, oh, you're doing it wrong. You say because that's fine. That's not wrong. It just means when they did the practice, something else happened. In some cases, they see the word. In some case, they focus on the word. They whatever that means. I mean, they cling to it. They react to it. Maybe they worry about it. The noting itself wasn't wrong. The problem is when they worried about it, they didn't note the worry. When they saw it, they didn't note the seeing. So it's just a matter of, as a teacher, to not really correct them. They're not doing anything wrong. They're neglecting. It's like, what do I do then? Oh, I'll note that too, But I worry about the words. Well, note worried, That's valuable. That's a good thing. It's a good that you're seeing. When I do this very simple thing, I make it so much more complicated than it has to be. Great. Good to see that about yourself. Learning that is the whole thing about vipassana. It really is pretty simple. I don't think you have to worry, is the student doing it wrong, practicing wrong? Because when that worry comes, then, well, that's something to note. That's something to learn about yourself. I worry about these things. Am I doing it correctly? You're a worrier. Worried.
Bhante, the next question. Is it enough to only be mindful? Shouldn't you also contemplate what it is that you are mindful of, and also the context of that?
No, none of that's necessary. Mindfulness is truly enough. There are other qualities that are necessary, but they're not necessary to develop on their own, like individually. What you would want to do is be aware when they're in excess or deficiency. Like, am I distracted? Then just be mindful of that. If you're distracted, it means you've got a deficiency of concentration, a lot of energy, but not enough concentration, that sort of thing, But really, mindfulness is the key. It's like you have all these parts to the car, and they all have to work. So sometimes you do have to fix them, you have to clean them or fix them, whatever. But when you want to drive the car, you turn the key. That's all you do. It's just the one thing. My teacher used this analogy. He said, just start the car. And all the other machinery, it runs by itself if it's working, right?
Alright, Bhante. Next question. There is so much suffering. Is the point to do one's best not to add to it?
The point is to understand suffering. Four Noble Truths. You're on the right track. Just study the Four Noble Truths, and you'll see what the point is. You'll understand what the point is, and that will lead you to apply yourself properly. When you understand the Four Noble Truths, you can apply yourself properly. That's why we practice mindfulness, based on the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, Bhante, that's all the questions that we have in Tier 1.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate all the interest and dedication. In these troubled times, when sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of Dhamma in the world, well, we still see there are people interested and knowledgeable and interested in becoming knowledgeable about the Dhamma. So, again, this is a combination of study of the Dhamma and, well, to some extent, practice of it. Maybe practice is going a little far, but the discussion of practice. So we're not just discussing theory. We had the first hour of theory, that's the first hour. Second hour, ideally, what we see, people have questions about practice, and we talk a little bit more about practice. And so that's the idea behind this, and I think it's great. I think it's working. I think we're on track. Technically, we had no serious issues. Hiccups, sure, but there'll always be hiccups. It's a good reminder of the uncertainty of everything we do. But good session. Thank you all for coming. And we'll do this again next week if we're all still alive. If I die before then, well, it's been good. Otherwise, see you next week. Have a good week, everyone. Sadhu.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you, Bhante.
for all your
Sadhu,
insight and
sadhu.
time, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.